The bridge of the Galactic research vessel, Harmony's Song, shuddered as another blast tore through its failing shields. Captain Zethkar pressed his 4 hands against the tactical display, his blue-scaled face twisted with desperation. Around him, his crew of various alien species worked frantically at their stations, their voices creating a symphony of panic in 17 different languages. "Shield generators at 12%, shouted Lieutenant Vexna, her insectoid mandibles, clicking rapidly. "We can't take much more of this." Through the main viewport, the enemy fleet stretched across the void like a plague of metal locusts. The Drakkari Dominion had found them at last. 30 sleek black warships, each bristling with weapons that could crack moons, surrounded the lone research vessel like predators circling wounded prey. Zethkar's breathing apparatus wheezed as he fought to stay calm. His people, the peaceful Veltar, had never been warriors. They were explorers, scientists, dreamers who reached for the stars with open hands instead of clenched fists. But the Drakkari saw only weakness in such gestures. "Captain," the communications officer's voice cracked with terror. "They're charging their planet-killer weapons. We have maybe 2 minutes before." A massive energy beam lanced past the ship, so close that the hull plating began to glow. The Harmony's Song was built for research, not war. Its armor was like paper against the Drakkari war machine. "Sir, we should surrender," whispered Navigator Kresh, his normally steady voice shaking. "Maybe they'll show mercy." Zethkar's primary eyes closed, while his secondary eyes continued to monitor the tactical display. He had seen what the Drakkari called mercy. Entire star systems reduced to ash. Billions of lives snuffed out for the crime of refusing to kneel. "Open all emergency channels," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute decision. "Broadcast on every frequency." "Captain?" Communications Officer Linda looked confused. "To whom? We're in dead space. No one can reach us in time." "To anyone who might be listening." Zethkar straightened to his full 7-foot height. "If we're going to die, let our deaths have meaning." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of failing systems and the distant rumble of enemy engines. Even the Drakkari stopped firing, perhaps curious about what final words their victims might offer. Zethkar stepped forward to the central communications array. "This is Captain Zethkar of the Galactic research vessel Harmony's Song. We are under attack by the Drakkari Dominion in the Outer Rim. Coordinates?" He rattled off their position with mechanical precision. 30 enemy vessels. We are a research ship with no military escort. They will show no mercy." His voice grew stronger as he continued. "We came to the stars to learn, to explore, to find beauty in the vast darkness. We discovered new worlds, cataloged strange life forms, and dreamed of a future where all species could live in harmony." He paused, watching the enemy ships reposition for their final attack. "We will not live to see that future, but if anyone receives this message, remember us. Remember that some still believed peace was possible." The transmission cut out as another blast rocked the ship. Sparks flew from overloaded consoles. The lights flickered and dimmed. "Incoming transmission from the Drakkari flagship," Linda reported, her voice barely audible. "Put it through." The main screen filled with the cruel visage of war leader Thrakmos. His reptilian features were scarred from countless battles, and his eyes glowed with the cold light of fanatic hatred. When he spoke, his voice was like grinding metal. "Research vessel. You interest us. Your people are known to be soft, weak, yet you broadcast your location to potential allies instead of begging for your pathetic lives." His lipless mouth stretched into something resembling a smile. "Perhaps you have more spine than we credited." "We have enough spine to know the difference between strength and cruelty," Zethkar replied evenly, "and enough wisdom to know which one endures." Thrakmos laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Wisdom? Your wisdom dies with you, Captain. But first you will watch as we burn every peaceful world we can find. Your distress call will bring nothing but death to any foolish enough to answer." The transmission ended. The Drakkari ships began their final approach, but something was wrong. Lieutenant Vexna looked up from her sensor station, her compound eyes wide with confusion. "Captain," I'm reading massive hyperspace disruptions. Something big is coming, out of jump space. How big? Zethkar asked, though part of him already knew the answer would change everything. Bigger than anything I've ever seen. The stars began to twist. Chapter 2. The unexpected answer space itself seemed to fold and tear as the hyperspace rifts opened like wounds in reality. The first ship to emerge was massive beyond comprehension, a kilometer-long wedge of gray, metal that looked like it had been forged in the heart of a dying star. Then came another. And another. Captain Zethkar stared in wonder as ship after ship materialized from the void. Not sleek, graceful vessels like those of the Galactic Federation, but brutal, functional warships covered in armor plating and bristling with weapons. They looked like they had been built for one purpose only: war. By the 7 moons, whispered Navigator Kresh. What are those things? The ships bore markings that Zethkar's translation software couldn't identify. Strange symbols and letters, in a language the galactic databases had never recorded. But there was something else, something that made his blood run cold with a mix of terror and hope. These ships had teeth, literally. Each vessel's prow was decorated with painted shark, jaws, grinning skulls, or other predatory imagery. Some had words scrawled across their hulls in what looked like warning colors. Pain train, death from above, mommy's little monster. Captain, Linda's voice was barely a whisper. I'm receiving a transmission. The language. It's not in our databases, but the universal translator is working on it. Static filled the bridge, then cleared to reveal a creature unlike anything in the known galaxy. It was bipedal, like many species, but something about its proportions seemed wrong. Too tall, too broad at the shoulders, with forward-facing predator eyes and a mouth full of white teeth that looked capable of tearing through bone. When it spoke, its voice was rough and carried an edge of controlled violence that made even the battle-scarred bridge crew step back from their stations. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet. We received your distress call. The creature's lips pulled back to reveal even more teeth in what might have been a smile. Figured. You might need some help with your bug problem. War Leader Thrakmos appeared on the secondary screen, his earlier confidence replaced by something that might have been concern. Unknown vessels, identify yourselves. You are interfering with Drakkari military operations. The creature, human, Zethkar's mind supplied from some half-remembered xenobiology text, turned its attention to the Drakkari commander. Its expression didn't change, but somehow it became infinitely more threatening. Admiral Chen, Terran Defense Fleet 30. Battle Group, and you are? I am War Leader Thrakmos of the Drakkari Dominion. These beings are our lawful prey. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Admiral Chen was quiet for a moment, studying the reptilian warrior with those unsettling predator eyes. When she spoke again, her voice was conversational, almost friendly. Tell me something, War Leader. How many ships do you have? Thrakmos puffed up with pride. 30 of the finest warships in the galaxy. More than enough to deal with one research vessel and whatever primitive fleet you've brought. 30 ships. Admiral Chen nodded thoughtfully. That's interesting. Computer, give me a count on our current force strength. A mechanical voice responded. Current fleet strength, 147 vessels. All ships report ready for combat operations. The silence that followed was profound. Even the background hum of the ship's engines seemed muted. Captain Zethkar found his voice first. 147 ships, but we only called for help an hour ago. How did you get here so fast? Admiral Chen's attention turned back to him, and her expression softened slightly. We were already in the area, Captain. This isn't the first distress call we've answered in this sector. Her face hardened again as she looked back at Thrakmos. Seems like someone's been making a habit of picking on people who can't fight back. War Leader Thrakmos had gone very still. Terran, I have never heard of this species. You are not part of the Galactic Federation. No, Admiral Chen agreed. We're not. We're from a little backwater planet called Earth. Most folks out here call it a death world, though we just call it home. She leaned forward in her command chair. See, we humans have a saying. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. And we've been doing nothing for too long. The human admiral gestured, and the main tactical display showed the full scope of the human fleet. Massive carriers disgorged clouds of fighters. Battleships that dwarfed the Drakkari vessels moved into formation with predatory grace. Destroyers and cruisers spread out in a net that was rapidly encircling the enemy fleet. So here's what's going to happen, Admiral Chen continued in that same conversational tone. You're going to power down your weapons, transfer your navigational data on every civilian target you've hit in the last year, and surrender for processing. In return, we won't demonstrate why planets like ours are called Deathworlds. Thrakmos's scales had gone pale, but his warrior pride wouldn't let him back down. You think your numbers intimidate us? The Drakkari have never known defeat. We will. Admiral, interrupted another voice from the human fleet. This one belonged to a different human, one whose scarred face spoke of countless battles. This is Colonel Martinez on the Revenge. My Marines are getting antsy. Should we show them what we learned at Kepler Station? Admiral Chen held up a hand. Patience, Colonel. Let's give them a chance to make the smart choice. Captain Zethkar watched the exchange with growing amazement. These humans spoke of battle, like other species discuss the weather. Casual, professional, terrifying. War leader Thrakmos made his choice. All ships, fire at will. Show these primitives the power of the Dominion. The Drakkari fleet opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams lanced through space. Plasma torpedoes streaked toward their targets, and mass drivers hurled projectiles at relativistic speeds. The humans didn't even bother to dodge. Point defense systems that moved too fast for organic eyes to follow swatted down incoming missiles like insects. Energy shields flared and held against beams that could melt asteroids. The human ships sailed through the barrage like it was nothing more than a light rain. Well, Admiral Chen said with a sigh, we tried to do this the easy way. Chapter 3. Deathworlders at War. What happened next would be remembered in galactic history as the day the universe learned why humans were classified as an endangered species, not because they were weak, but because they were too dangerous to be allowed to spread. The human fleet moved with a coordination that defied belief. Ships that massed millions of tons wheeled and turned like fighters, their formations shifting with fluid precision. It wasn't just their technology that was terrifying, it was the way they used it. Where other species would have closed to energy weapon range and traded shots until one side was destroyed, the humans fought like a living organism. Destroyers raced ahead to launch torpedo spreads that forced the Drakkari into defensive formations. Cruisers flanked from impossible angles, their weapons targeting specific systems rather than simply trying to destroy. Battleships hung back, their massive guns providing precise fire support that seemed to anticipate where the enemy would be, rather than where they were. Captain Zethkar had studied military history as part of his officer training. He had read about the great space battles, the legendary tactics, the brilliant strategies that shaped the galaxy. Nothing had prepared him for this. How are they doing that? Navigator Kresh whispered, staring at the tactical display. It's like they're reading the enemy's minds. Admiral Chen's voice came across the comm channel, calm and professional. Target their engine clusters first. Let's slow them down before they decide to run. A pause. And somebody get me a firing solution on their flagship. I want to have a private conversation with Mr. Personality over there. The human weapons were unlike anything in the galactic arsenal. Instead of the clean, energy beams favored by most civilizations, they used kinetic rounds accelerated to significant fractions of light speed. The impact of a human railgun slug didn't just damage a ship, it rang it like a bell, shaking crews unconscious and scrambling electronics. But it was their fighters that truly terrified the Drakkari. Human fighter craft were tiny things, barely the size of shuttles, but they moved with an agility that seemed to violate physics. They darted between capital ship weapons like dancers, their pilots pulling maneuvers that should have liquefied any organic being. The G-forces alone should have been lethal. How are they surviving those acceleration curves? Lieutenant Vexna asked, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was seeing. Because they're from a death world, Zethkar realized with growing amazement. Their bodies evolved to handle extreme stress. What would kill us is just normal for them. A flight of human fighters was currently demonstrating this point by threading the needle between two Draghari cruisers, their weapons carving through armor plating like it was soft cheese. The enemy ships tried to track them with point defense, but the humans were already gone, having pulled turns that generated over 20 standard gravities of acceleration. War leader Thrakmos was screaming orders on the command channel, his earlier confidence completely shattered. Evasive maneuvers. All ships evasive maneuvers. How are they so fast? It's not just speed. Admiral Chen's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. It's experience. See where we come from, everything is trying to kill you. The weather, the wildlife, the diseases, sometimes even the plants. We've been fighting for survival since before we developed spaceflight. You've been fighting farmers and researchers. The human flagship, a massive dreadnought called Terra's Wrath, moved through the battle like a shark through a school of fish. Its weapons tracked and fired with inhuman precision, each shot calculated to disable rather than destroy. They weren't trying to kill the Draghari. They were surgically dismantling their ability to fight. It was perhaps more terrifying than simple destruction would have been. Admiral Chen, Captain Zethkar found himself speaking into the comm. Your restraint is appreciated. Many species would have simply destroyed them. The human woman's laugh was sharp. Captain, we didn't come all this way to commit genocide. We came to make a point. Her expression hardened. But don't mistake mercy for weakness. We could have ended this fight in the first 30 seconds if we'd wanted to. As if to prove her point, one of the human battleships, the new Stalingrad, fired a single shot from its main gun. The projectile struck a Draghari cruiser dead center and passed completely through it, leaving a perfectly round hole that vented atmosphere and debris. The ship didn't explode or break apart. It just stopped working. The message was clear. We could do this to all of you anytime we want. The Draghari fleet was in full retreat now, their formation completely broken. But the humans weren't letting them go. They herded the enemy ships like sheepdogs, working a flock, cutting off escape routes and forcing surrenders with clinical efficiency. This is War Leader Thrakmos, came the broken transmission from the Draghari flagship. We surrender. Please, we surrender. Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight of absolute authority. Power. Down all weapon systems. Prepare to be boarded. Any ship that tries to run will be disabled and boarded anyway, but you won't like the methods we use. A pause. And Thrakmos, you and I are going to have a very long conversation about your choice of targets. The battle was over. 30 Draghari warships, the pride of an interstellar empire, had been defeated by a human fleet that had barely worked up a sweat. Not a single human ship had been destroyed. Most hadn't even been significantly damaged. Captain Zethkar stared at the tactical display in wonder and terror. These beings, these humans from their death world called Earth, had just rewritten everything. The galaxy thought it knew about warfare, but the biggest surprise was yet to come. Chapter 4. The reckoning Admiral Sarah Chen materialized on the bridge of the Harmony's song in a swirl of transporter energy, accompanied by 2 of her officers. Captain Zethkar had expected her to be imposing in person, but the reality was somehow more unsettling. She was tall but not massive, built with the lean efficiency of a predator. Her movements were fluid and controlled, and those forward-facing eyes missed nothing. "Captain," she said, offering what appeared to be a gesture of greeting. "Permission to come aboard?" "Granted, of course," Zethkar managed, still trying to process what he had just witnessed. "Admiral Chen, what you've done here, how can we ever thank you?" "You already did." She moved to the main display, studying the aftermath of the battle. Draghari ships hung dead in space, their crews preparing for boarding operations. "You sent out a distress call. You chose to die with dignity rather than beg for mercy. That means something to us. One of her officers, a grizzled man with scars crossing his dark face, stepped forward. I'm Colonel Martinez, Terran Marines. We've been tracking these particular pirates for 3 months. They've hit 17 civilian targets in this sector alone. Pirates? Lieutenant Vexina looked confused. But they're the Drakhari Dominion. They're a recognized military power. Admiral Chen's expression grew cold. A military that exclusively targets civilians isn't a military. It's a gang of thugs with fancy ships. She turned to face the bridge crew. And that's exactly how we're going to treat them. The implications of that statement sent chills through the assembled aliens. Captain Zethkar had studied human history during his xenobiology courses. He knew what humans did to pirates. Admiral, he said carefully, the Galactic Federation has protocols for dealing with captured military personnel. Treaties, conventions. The Galactic Federation, Admiral Chen interrupted, has been allowing this to happen for years. How many distress calls like yours have gone unanswered? How many research ships, colony vessels, and trading posts have been destroyed while the Federation held committee meetings about proper diplomatic responses? She gestured to the view screen, where human boarding parties were moving through the disabled Drakhari ships with methodical efficiency. We've been monitoring Federation emergency channels for 6 months. Do you know what we found? 1,700 distress calls. 1,700 ships crying for help as they were destroyed by recognized military powers like the Drakhari Dominion. The bridge fell silent. Zethkar felt his heart sinking as the magnitude of the Federation's failure became clear. 1,700, Admiral Chen continued. And how many were answered by Federation forces? 12. 12 ships saved out of 1,700. Her voice carried a weight of controlled fury. We may be newcomers to this galaxy, Captain, but where we come from, that's not acceptable. Colonel Martinez stepped forward, consulting a datapad. War leader Thrakmos has been very cooperative. Turns out the Drakhari have detailed records of their military operations. 237 civilian targets in the last 2 years alone. No military bases, no strategic installations, just soft targets that couldn't fight back. What will you do with them? Navigator Kresh asked quietly. Admiral Chen's smile was sharp as a blade. We're going to make an example. Every ship they've attacked, every life they've taken, it's all going on the public record. Then we're going to broadcast their complete surrender to every civilized world in this sector. She paused. After that, we're going to make sure they never attack anyone again. You mean execute them? Captain Zethkar felt compelled to ask, though part of him feared the answer. Nothing so simple, Colonel Martinez replied. We're going to put them to work. Community service, you might say. They're going to help us build something. Build what? Lieutenant Vexna's mandibles clicked, nervously. Admiral Chen turned to face the main view screen, where more human ships were emerging from hyperspace. Not warships this time, but massive construction vessels and cargo haulers escorted by destroyers. A message, she said simply. We're going to build a fortress here, right in the middle of their old hunting ground. A base where ships like yours can find safe harbor, where distress calls will be answered within hours instead of days. Her eyes glowed with fierce determination. And we're going to staff it with volunteers from every species that's lost people to pirates like these. Captain Zethkar stared at her in amazement. A permanent human presence in this sector? But the Federation will never approve it. The treaties, the territorial agreements, the Federation had their chance. Admiral Chen cut him off. They chose bureaucracy over justice, politics over protection, so we're choosing to act. She gestured to her fleet. Every ship out there volunteered for this mission. Every crew member knew they might not be going home. We didn't come here because our government ordered it. We came because it was the right thing to do. The human admiral moved to the communications station. Lieutenant Linda, isn't it? I need you to open a channel to all Federation monitoring stations in this sector. The young communications officer looked to her captain, who nodded reluctantly. Channel open, Admiral. Admiral Chen's voice carried across the stars, broadcast on every emergency frequency in known space. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet. Today we answered a distress call from the research vessel Harmony's Song. We found them under attack by 30 ships of the Drakari Dominion, a military force that has been systematically targeting civilian vessels for years, while the Galactic Federation debated proper responses. She paused, letting that sink in before continuing. The Drakari fleet has been captured. Their crews will face justice for their crimes against peaceful beings. But more importantly, this is notice to every pirate, every raider, every predator, who thinks civilized space is their hunting ground. Humanity is here now. We may not be part of your federation, but we remember what it means to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Her voice grew harder, carrying the promise of retribution across the void. To those who prey on the innocent, find a new profession. Because the next distress call you ignore might not go unanswered. The next victim you target might have friends from a death world, and we will find you. The transmission ended. In the silence that followed, Captain Zethkar realized that everything had changed. Not just for the Drakari, not just for this sector, but for the entire galaxy. The humans had arrived, and they had no intention of playing by the old rules. Epilogue. A new dawn 3 months after the Battle of Dead Space, as historians would later call it. Captain Zethkar stood on the observation deck of Sanctuary Station, watching construction crews put the finishing touches on humanity's first permanent installation in the Outer Rim. The station was a thing of beauty and menace combined. Its graceful curves spoke of advanced engineering and aesthetic sensibility, but the weapon emplacements and patrol ships made its purpose unmistakably clear. This was a fortress dedicated to protecting the innocent. Impressive, isn't it, Admiral? Chen joined him at the viewport, her reflection ghost-like in the transparent aluminum. 3 months from first groundbreaking to full operational status. My engineers are proud of that record. It's remarkable, Zethkar agreed. But it's more than just a station, isn't it? It's a symbol. The best kind of symbol, Chen replied. One that does something useful while it inspires. She gestured to the busy traffic around the station. We've answered 43 distress calls in the last 3 months, 43 ships that might not have made it home to their families. Through the viewport, they could see representatives from dozens of species working together on the station's outer hull. Veltar engineers worked alongside human technicians, while Kepler scientists collaborated with Terran researchers on improved sensor arrays. The sight would have been impossible just months ago. The Federation Council isn't happy, Zethkar observed. Ambassador Krolex called it an illegal military occupation just yesterday. Admiral Chen's laugh was sharp. Ambassador Krolex represents a species that hasn't answered a single distress call in living memory. His opinion carries exactly the weight it deserves. She turned serious. But you're right. This won't be easy. There are going to be political consequences. Are you prepared for that? Captain, my people spent centuries fighting wars against ourselves before we reached the stars. We know the cost of standing up for what's right. Her eyes reflected the light of distant stars. But we also know the cost of doing nothing. A soft chime announced an incoming transmission. The communications officer's voice echoed through the observation deck. Admiral Chen to the command center. Priority Alpha message from the Third Fleet. As they walked through the station's corridors, Zethkar marveled at the changes he had witnessed. The saved Drakari prisoners, no longer war criminals but workers earning their redemption, labored alongside their former victims on construction projects. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was something more valuable. A chance for justice that didn't require revenge. The command center was a hive of activity. Officers from a dozen species worked at stations around a central tactical display that showed the entire sector. Green icons marked safe shipping lanes, blue showed patrol routes, and red indicated areas where pirates might still be operating. The red areas were shrinking daily. Admiral, reported Commander Kim, Admiral Chen's chief of staff. We're receiving distress calls from the Vega sector. Multiple civilian vessels under attack by what appears to be a hegemony battle group. Admiral Chen studied the tactical display with predatory intensity. How far? 18 hours at maximum hyperspace velocity. The fourth battle group is closer. They could be there in 12. Signal Admiral Okafor. Tell her she's authorized to respond with full force. Chen turned to address the entire command center. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of various classifications, looks like we're getting busy again. Captain Zethkar watched the controlled chaos as humanity prepared to answer another call for help. Ships were already moving toward hyperspace jump points, their crews eager to stand between predators and prey once again. Admiral, he said quietly, what you're building here, it's bigger than just protecting shipping lanes, isn't it? She nodded slowly. We're building hope, Captain, for every species that's been told they're too weak to fight back, too small to matter, too peaceful to survive in a violent galaxy. Her eyes blazed with fierce determination. We're proving that the strong have a duty to protect the weak, not exploit them. The main screen lit up with a real-time tactical feed from the Vega sector. Human ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their weapons already locked onto pirate vessels that had been terrorizing civilian traffic for months. We're also proving something else, Admiral Chen continued as they watched the brief, decisive battle unfold. We're proving that predators aren't the apex of evolution. Protectors are. On the screen, the last pirate ship powered down its weapons and transmitted its surrender. Another victory for civilization over chaos. Another group of innocents saved. From predators who thought mercy was weakness. Captain Zethkar smiled as he watched more alien species volunteer to join the human defense fleets. The galaxy was learning that strength and compassion weren't opposites. They were partners in the greatest dance of all, the dance of civilization itself. As news of humanity's actions spread across the stars, more species began to remember what they had almost forgotten. That someone somewhere still believed the innocent were worth protecting. That someone still thought justice was worth fighting for. That someone still answered when the weak called for help. And in the darkness between the stars, predators began to learn a new kind of fear. Not of superior firepower or advanced technology, but of beings who would cross the galaxy to answer a stranger's cry for help. The humans had arrived, and they had brought something the galaxy had almost lost. They had brought hope. The end.